The Last of Us Part 1, the Callisto Protocol, Dead Space Remake, and Resident Evil 4 Remake are all coming out between September 22 and March 2023, which begs the question, is now the best time in history of gaming to be a fan of survival horror? There are a few reasons why I would argue for the upcoming months, is that even though 3 of these games mentioned are remakes, they are still remakes of some of the best games of all time. Dead Space looks to be going above and beyond what can be expected. With Resident Evil 4, we have seen what Capcom was capable of after their masterful work on RE2 and RE3, and the argument could be made that RE2 is the best remake of all time, and when you combine the quality that they put into the past 2 remakes with what many consider to be the best Resident Evil game, you have what could be potentially a phenomenal experience. And finally, you have The Last of Us Part 1, which even though it has already been remade for the PS4, it still remains a must-play for fans of survival horror. It seems hard to imagine another 6 months of gaming history coming even close to the upcoming 6 months of survival horror, and looking back through the decades of history, there is only one period that I found that comes remotely close, and it's back before Y2K. The year is 1999. Let's take a quick chronological look back at 1999, a year that started off with the introduction of one of the best horror gaming series ever, with Silent Hill in February of 99. Although most consider the second entry to be the best in the series, if the original didn't create this psychological horror genre, it at least made it popular to the masses. Instead of being constrained by technology, Silent Hill embraced things like fog, darkness, and radio static to create an unnerving mood for the whole game. Capcom was already deep into survival horror with Resident Evil 1 and 2, but with the success the company saw in the genre, we were introduced to another series. Dino Crisis capitalized on the survival horror of Resident Evil and the popularity of Jurassic Park, and made a game that was able to stand on its own away from Resident Evil. The game was directed by Shinji Mikami, who is the godfather of survival horror with games like Resident Evil, RE4, Dino Crisis, and The Evil Within on his resume. It's actually very surprising that Dino Crisis hasn't been rebooted or remade yet. Although it wasn't a commercial success, it was a critical success and can still be pinpointed as a revolution for implementing RPG elements into first-person shooters. I didn't have a Pentium chip strong enough, and my Voodoo card was probably underpowered, but I was able to watch and play some of it at a friend's house. System Shock 2 was easily ahead of its time. The mainstream didn't come around until all of the elements of System Shock 2 were in the spiritual successor, also made by Ken Levine and Irrational Games nearly a decade later in 2007 with BioShock. In 2006, X-Play ranked System Shock 2 as the second scariest game ever, only behind Silent Hill 2. The final game in 1999 was Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, which came out in November. Capcom was now in full Resident Evil mode, as 2 came out in 98, 3 in 99, and Code Veronica would come out in 2000, in addition to the Dino Crisis survival horror series. Nemesis was the beginning of the series, moving more into the action. The difference between 1999 and now is that back then, these were all original titles versus remakes. 1999 was also a span of about 4 titles in 9 months compared to the upcoming 4 games in 6 months that begins in December 2022, meaning that you have a higher survival horror per month ratio. Both timeframes have their benefits, and there isn't a wrong answer, but if I had to decide, I would say that we are currently coming up on what appears to be the best time ever to be a fan of survival horror. If you've never played some of these upcoming remakes, then it's no contest, and even though we don't know if the Callisto Protocol will be good, all ingredients are in place, including the setting and the developers. As for The Last of Us, Dead Space, and Resident Evil 4, many consider these entries to be the best in the series.